All right, it looks like we're live. So, David, you have some interesting perspectives that I wanted to pick up on from our last conversation. So, you are Catholic, like a strict Catholic, which means you believe the church is infallible, or the Pope is infallible, and that you take the Bible mostly literally. Is that correct?
You were breaking up a lot. Do you want to repeat everything you said?
Oh, sorry about that. Is it better now? Can you hear me clearly now?
Yeah, it was buffering. It was buffering. I don't know if it's buffering on your end or on my end.
Oh, I have no idea. So you believe that you're a Catholic, a strict Catholic, which means you believe that the Pope and the Church are infallible. They can't make mistakes. Is that correct?
Well, they can make mistakes, but not in the ways that matter.
What does that mean?
So, for example, I'm a complete moron, but I can still go to heaven.
So what does it mean when you say that the Church is infallible in some sense?
Well, I am infallible. I have a passive infallibility. That means that when I regurgitate to you the infallible dogmas of the Church, I can't go wrong, but I'm still an ignorant moron. So you need to understand what infallibility is. It's just a guarantee that the essential saving truths are accessible to everyone. The geniuses with 6 PhDs, all the way down to the moron who can't even write his own name.
Oh, so it's only in respect to the pertinent truths to salvation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but everything else, they can still make tons of mistakes.
Yeah. There are more mistakes than, there are a lot more errors that get tossed around than there are truths in the church.
So would you say that the church's stance on like infant death in the early 16th or 17th century, where they went to limbo or went to hell or something if they didn't get baptized, but then they changed that position later?
There was no change.
You sure about that? Because I'm pretty sure they did, in fact, change a lot of those policies.
Well, there are campaigns, there are schools of thought, there are people that like to talk, theologians that like to hash out ideas, and people that have different points of view. But no, the church's position on limbo hasn't changed. There are basically 4 kinds of hell. There's the hell that you can't get out of, that is eternal damnation for those who are called reprobates. And then there's the limbo of the children who were not baptized, and they do not get to enjoy the beatific vision, but they don't have to suffer. They have some sort of pleasant, natural life. And then there's the limbo of the just. That's where when Christ died, he went down to rescue Adam and Eve from hell, quote unquote hell. That was the 3rd sort of level of this underworld. And then, of course, you have purgatory, where those who are on their way to heaven get purified. And then there's heaven. But there are only 2 final destinations for any person, heaven or hell. It just so happens that the hell of the infants that aren't baptized is not the torture that the reprobate have to suffer. There are different degrees, even within just to say that even within hell itself, there are different levels and degrees, and in heaven there are different levels and degrees of beatitude. So it's important to bear that in mind. It's a spectrum. It's not a black and white thing.
I was pretty sure, I was reading recently that the church changed their stance where they originally said that the unbaptized children went to a lower level of hell or a worse hell, and then they changed it to a higher level of hell. And I'm pretty sure that was something stated by the Pope or the papacy, and the papacy the Pope just recently said he was apologized for mistakes that he's made.
Yeah. Well, there may be different ways of describing it. Higher in one sense, lower in another sense, right? But no, as far as I know, there has never been an official dogma about the limbo of those children that were not baptized. I don't think it's been formally defined. If it has, then I just need to look it up and find out where it was formally defined. But to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been formally defined, which means that theologians can still discuss it if that's the case. But I'm not well informed about limbo, other than there are a lot of rumors going around that it was overturned and that there was a change, but I've read to the contrary, that that's just sort of an urban myth. But I'll look into it.
So if there was something that was well defined by the church and then they changed it later, would you, and it was something significant towards salvation, would that challenge your position?
Yeah, I would abandon Jesus Christ as a false Messiah if I were able to become convinced that a dogma was contradicted or that a dogma was objectively false. You know, like if Jesus has brothers and sisters, then I abandon Christianity.
I mean, just specifically about the church. So if the church made a dogma and the church made a statement about a position, and then they later said that that was a mistake and it had to do with something salvation, would that refute your position, or would you still you'd still be a Christian, right?
No, I would not be a Christian. I would abandon the whole false religion of Christianity. Because, for example, with my example that I gave with Christ not having any siblings, that is dogmatically defined. So if they find, let's say they find the bones of Jesus and they find the bones of his brothers and sisters buried next to him, and we can confirm that these are blood siblings, then he was not the Jewish Messiah. He was a false Messiah, and I will still love him the way I love Muhammad. But I love Muhammad as a false and evil prophet of a false religion, you know. But I won't follow his religion, you know? Because the church has defined dogmatically that Jesus Christ did not have any siblings. So the church has put her neck on the line with that and with many other dogmas. For example, if you could find the bones of Mary, then I leave Christianity, because the church has formally defined that she was assumed body and soul into heaven. So there are only two people in heaven with their body, with their soul and body, and that is Jesus and Mary. The rest are there only in their soul, and they're awaiting the resurrection, the final judgment.
Interesting. And you also think, what is the church's stance? If I remember it, the church doesn't take the 6,000 year young earth creation stance, do they?
Well, that's what I've come to discover. Yeah, I've just come to discover that it does teach indirectly. It does dogmatically teach indirectly, not directly, but indirectly. It does dogmatically oblige us to believe in a young earth. Yes, that's my big breakthrough this past month, and I'm very excited about it.
Well, as far as I know, some people in the church would disagree on that. Like, I think maybe the
most people would. Yeah, all the recent popes and 99.9% of everyone. Yeah.
But that's just not something significant to salvation, so it's not really, it's something that we can be fallible about.
No, I think it's significant. I think it's just one of these issues that's clouded today, and it's part of the punishment of sin. Like, we're just blind to that. And I could be wrong, but from what I've understood, it's indirectly defined, meaning that the logical implications of the existing dogmas, for example, there's a dogma of the Council of Vienna that says the soul is the form of the body. So you can't have evolution. There's absolutely no way to have secular evolution, and there's no way to have theistic evolution either. If the soul is the form of the body as the church defined dogmatically in the Council of Vienna. So that's an example of a dogma that is infallible, which cannot be contradicted, and which has logical implications for the theory of evolution, even a theistic evolution. So that's what I've discovered, that and other interesting theological truths or doctrines which imply that evolution is untenable for the Catholic, and philosophically untenable for everyone else too.
So, but if you and you and the church are infallible in your ability to convey information that's relevant to salvation, and you and the church disagree about evolution in the age of the earth, it doesn't mean one of you is necessarily wrong?
Well, the church is right, and I'm only, my infallibility is a passive thing. When I regurgitate the dogmatic truths, then I can't be wrong. So, for example, when I say that the soul is the form of the body, I cannot be wrong. That's an infallible statement by me, but it's a passive infallible statement, okay? Now, my interpretation of that is that, well, therefore, evolution is false. Theistic evolution is not on the table. That's The church has never said that. I'm saying that. The church has never said that. So either I'm right, and a lot of people in the church just have forgotten about that, or been sort of distracted by science, and they're all enthralled by science, and they just sort of forgot about that. Or I'm wrong somehow, and I'll just bow and submit to the church when she corrects me. But I don't, I don't know if that's really a hot topic item right now, where the church is going to make a dogmatic definition about the age of the earth. But I've heard some people talk about that it might be something that gets defined soon.
Interesting. And so what is your position on the science? Because the science seems to strongly suggest that that's false.
Yeah, that's why it took me 10 years to quote unquote come out of the closet creationist. And I don't listen to that video I sent you about why I am no longer a young earth creationist, but the punchline to that joke is that because it's redundant to call myself a young earth creationist Catholic, because all Catholics have to abandon theistic evolution and every other form of punctuated equilibrium and progressive evolution and progressive creationism and all these sorts of things. We are obliged to believe that the earth is, I don't know, like some people say, under 10,000 years old or something like that. What was the question?
The science seems to disprove that, so why do you believe it?
Yeah, I don't know the science. That's one thing I have in my favor. I don't know the science. Aaron Raw's coming back in 2 days. On Sunday, I'm going to interview Aaron Raw, and he's pretty pumped up. he's pretty pumped up.
Yeah, he gets excited about talking with a young earth creationist. So
yeah, and last time I talked to him, I didn't know that I was young earth creationist. So I've always favored that secretly. I always wanted it to be true, but I just thought that the church sort of was leaning towards what the science said, and the science seems to be there's a consensus that evolution is the case. So, but I always secretly wanted to believe in the historical veracity of Genesis, and so now I've come to believe that it is historically valid Genesis. But I don't know the science, so maybe you can enlighten me a little bit tonight.
So, if the science did show that that was false, would you change your position, or strongly suggested it?
No, what you need to understand about me is that I see a hierarchy in the sciences. So I see God as science itself. God is perfect knowledge, perfect wisdom, perfect truth. And then he gives us, he gives us creation and everything, but he also gives us, he gives us the book of nature, which is sort of a divine revelation of himself, but he also gives us a revelation in terms of the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament, and the Ten Commandments, all these sorts of things. And Jesus Christ came, founded the church, and blah, blah, blah. And so we have divine revelation. We also have theology, which looks at and unpacks all this sort of divine revelation. And it also looks at philosophy. It draws on philosophy, which is the next lower science in this hierarchy of sciences. So you've got God, revelation, theology, philosophy, and then underneath that is physics. And by the word physics, I just mean all of natural science. So I don't draw on physics or the natural sciences as the sort of source of any of these positions that I take. For example, when I go to communion, the Eucharist, if you were to take what looks like bread and wine and analyze it, everything would come back saying that it's bread and wine, right?
Right.
But I don't believe that it's bread and wine after the consecration, after a valid consecration. Now, is it possible that some of the consecrations that I think are valid are not valid and it just remains bread and wine? Yeah, sure. Hopefully not too often, but in our day and age, it certainly is a possibility more and more with all the, disbelievers in the pulpit and stuff like that.
So do you believe that it literally does change to body and wine, and we just aren't testing it at the right time to figure that out? Or do you think it's just our tests can't detect it because it's like of a spiritual kind of body? It's not that it's spiritual. It's that there, and this actually helps you. This will, I hope, help you to understand why no amount of physical evidence or natural science would ever draw me away from my belief in young earth creationism. Because if we look at the Eucharist, the way that I see the Eucharist is different from how you will see the Eucharist. I see it as the
accidents remain, but the substance changes. So this is straight back to Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, where they make this distinction between substance or essence and accidents. Are you familiar with those distinctions?
Not from a long time ago. Don't remember them.
Okay.
In detail.
Yeah. But this is a metaphysical approach to reality, whereby we break down what is essential.
Oh, essence and existence, that distinction.
Accidental. You have a short hair, and you're a man. So these are accidents, right?
So the essence existence distinction.
Yeah, and this is actually part of one of my favorite proofs of the existence of God, is that all contingent things are and all composite things are actually not only reducible to a material composition, but they're actually a composition of essence and existence. This is a sort of breakthrough that I had recently when I was looking into the modal proof of God's existence by Blessed John Duns Scotus. If you haven't looked into it, I really recommend it. I think you would really appreciate it. It's very deep, very subtle, and it would take you a while to digest it. It's on my list of things to do. I just got really excited about young Earth creationism, so I haven't had time to look at it. But I highly recommend you look into it, because it revolves around possibilities, and it draws on this notion that if God is possible, then he is necessary. The only way that we can know that God does not exist is if it's absolutely impossible for God to exist. There are all sorts of ideas like this. And of course, essentially ordered series of causality versus accidentally ordered series of causality. Lots of really subtle and interesting notions in Scotus. I recommend you look into it.
Great. That's the pure actuality argument, where God is pure actuality and no potentiality or something like that.
That's a small part of it. Yeah, that's a small part of it, but it has to do with essentially ordered series of causes. So that, like, for example, right now I'm lifting the glass, and it's a will that is behind the motion of the glass, but it's like there's a whole chain of mechanical parts that are going about lifting my arm and all that sort of thing to make that glass move. And there's a hierarchy there. And my will is necessarily more perfect than, the physical stuff in my arm, and certainly more perfect than the glass itself, which is inanimate. So there's a sort of hierarchy, but it's in real time, meaning that it's a vertical analysis of causation, where you don't need to look at, because I was obsessed with looking at the first cause and, going backwards in time and arguments like that with entropy and stuff like that. But this new modal thing focuses on every given moment. There's a vertical chain of causation, which of course intermeshes with the horizontal accidental series of causes too. But it's really interesting. I haven't mastered it, but I'm hoping to at some point.
Yeah, my position on those arguments is that most of them are just semantic properties that don't actually exist. Like, I can just make them a new property called the Widgemet property, and there's a maximum Widgemet, and so there must be a Widgemaster or something like that. And so essentially I can just do the same thing and say that I can grant that there is some necessary thing, but that necessary thing can just be a different necessary thing that's not a God, like pantheism. And I can explain everything that the God supposedly does. Yeah,
I think you're attacking more Anselm's ontological argument. This is a completely different approach. I think one of the reasons why Scotus got excited about this path is because it sidestepped a lot of the hairy issues with Anselm.
Right, but I'm saying I can apply the same problems. It has the same problems. And they're demonstrable problems that exist in every field of philosophy, like the problem of universals, for example. Like, if you want to say that there is this maximal property in any sense, and it applies to all possible worlds in any possible way, well, I can just say that there could be multiple possible worlds that have different definitions of this maximal property, and so they're different things. And that kind of invalidates the entire argument.
Yeah, I know I'm a little bit familiar with your approach, having talked to you once. And when I think about nominalism versus universal, what do they call it? Universalism or idealism? What do they call it? What's the opposite of nominalism?
In which context? From what field?
Well, like, there are only particulars, or are there these sort of Platonic forms? Like,
monism versus dualism?
Maybe that's what it is. I'm not sure what the distinction is, but my point is that when I think about nominalism and then think about universals, it's fun, but I don't find myself convinced either way. I can't grab onto anything there, and I guess intuitively, it is more intuitive to just lean towards nominalism, right? Just they're only particulars, and we abstract in a way that is less real than the actual particular that we're encountering. But in my heart of hearts, I'm not drawn to those kinds of philosophies, but it's just easier to grapple with, I think.
All right, I agree. So the pure actuality, or the pure potential that God is, that's a universal property. So if you have that universal property, it faces the problem of universals just like any universal property. I can just say there's a equivalent property that can exist that's just a different property. It's just not the God thing. It's just a non-conscious thing called pantheism. So there's no real justification for any of those arguments. They don't hold up to anything. They don't indicate anything. They're essentially just arbitrary assertions based on our imagination. There's no way to verify that the property that you're asserting to exist is something that corresponds to reality. It isn't just an imaginary property.
Yeah, I'm not buying your argument, but I'm sympathizing with your tendency, for sure.
Well, how would you show that your property, the properties that you're arguing for, are any more justified than the property I can make up?
I haven't thought about that. I mean, I have a powerful imagination. I can be right there with you. You know, it's just like we talked about last time. It's just my experience that I'm not God and that God is God that trumps everything, and sort of reduces these fun questions into a little bit of a lower level in terms of priority or urgency. There's less urgency for me now to play with those sorts of ideas, although it is fun, and I enjoy when you talk about it. I do enjoy it, but I'm so firmly convinced that God is God that I don't get excited in the way that maybe you're excited about what you've discovered or what you think you might have discovered.
Well, I look at it from two perspectives. Let's assume that you will take the point that you're right. Let's say God does exist, and that this philosophy is like a game of chess that we're playing. We're both in heaven. We both know God exists. We're going to play this philosophical game because it's fun.
Yeah.
Now, if I can demonstrate that the rules of this game that we're playing, you lose 100% of the time. There's no justification to indicate the existence of God, whether or not one exists or not. Then it would be reasonable to conclude that based off of all of the human knowledge we have right now, there is no justifiable reason to believe in a God, correct?
No. I mean, I for one don't trust anyone but God, and I mean, I do trust logic because my God is logic. I do trust science because my God is science. But when a man like you yourself, when a man tells me that they can prove that 2 + 2 = 5, for example, or anything but 4, I can find it interesting, but I just won't believe him, no matter how exciting his proof is. I just believe that 2 + 2 is 4, and I'm not being silly here. I have met full-grown adults that do not think that 2 + 2 actually is 4. They think it's just a social convention, and I think that's sad. But I've met PhD physicists who don't believe that 2 + 2 = 4. That's the kind of world we live in today.
Well, there's actually possible ways to make that happen, but it's it's an interesting discussion in and of itself. So if you believe that science and logic are God, and science and logic indicate something that isn't a God, how would you try and square that circle?
Well, it's kind of like if who's your, do you have any sports heroes at all in any sport?
Not really, no.
Oh crap. Okay, well, you like chess, so let's say that you like a certain chess player, okay, and then he's auctioning off his famous chess set, and you happen to buy it, and then I come and visit you, and I sit down with you at this chessboard, and it turns out I'm not quite as good at using these same chess pieces that grandmaster was using, and it's not really the same game. I'm not living up to that standard. And so it's the same thing when you and I use science or math. We're just not wielding it with the same skill that God would, or even that his saints have. You know, that's my opinion. I mean, I read the Bible as an enemy of the church, and I all I saw was silliness and violence and hypocrisy and nonsense. But even as an atheist, when I read some of the saints interpreting the same passages that I was familiar with as an enemy of the church, they came to life in a way that was exciting and piqued my curiosity. And now that I'm Catholic, I mean, I'm just still enamored of their interpretations and of their explications, and I'm still amazed at the insights that they have. So it's kind of like the image that they use often in the church is that of a weapon. Like it comes to life in the hand of a master, but in my hand, it's just a big, clunky, heavy, dorky sword, you know. But in the hand of a great master, it's a beautiful thing to watch. So that's how I see scripture. That's how I see science. That's how I see mathematics. That's how I see philosophy. That's how I see theology. And if you listen to Aaron Ra talk about philosophy or theology, it's really it's not inspirational to me. I don't know about you, but I'm not inspired by it.
Well, to me, that sounds kind of like you, if you play chess with your Uncle Bob and your Uncle Bob beats you, and you think Uncle Bob is the greatest chess player ever, and then you go play Gary Kasparov, and you lose to Gary Kasparov, you say, well, Gary, I mean, you're good at chess, but you're no Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob can really take you out. Because that's kind of like what it sounds to me like what you're saying. And how do you know if you can't get Uncle Bob to face Gary Kasparov?
Yeah, well, you're making some assumptions about my Uncle Bob there, but you know, but anything's possible, right? But no, I mean, yeah, I agree. I see your point there for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm out of my depth in every domain. I'm out of my depth in theology, philosophy, natural science. I mean, I did study physics at university, but you know, I'm a nobody, and I've got nothing to offer. I got nothing to say. I got nothing to teach anybody. My whole trip is point people to Jesus Christ and His church. That's it, you know. And if I have fun talking with people, talking with atheists, talking with Protestants, and you know, playing around, I don't take it too seriously, and I hope other people don't. But I like it. I enjoy it. It's fun. But there's a sort of a thought experiment I had today at work where, you know, because I get a lot of people insulting me that I'm so stupid and that, and I kind of want to adopt that as, like, if someone asks, why do you believe in God? It's because I'm dumb, and because I'm weak, and because I'm desperate. You know, like all the insults that I get from the anti-Catholic atheists. I want to adopt them because it's for one thing, it's humbling, but for another thing, it's the reason that I am Catholic is because, for example, I am blind. If I saw, if I were able to see, I wouldn't need Jesus Christ, right? And there are actually parables in the Bible about that. So it's an interesting thought experiment I had of just sort of putting myself down. And it's true, you know, even though my IQ is probably average, but to put yourself down in that way, I think it's a useful approach for a Christian. For yourself, I don't know how you move in atheist circles. It's probably better to put yourself up.
Well,
right?
From my perspective, I start with kind of like the Dilettante approach. Is I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. So I'm only going to accept positions that I can show that they have support philosophically and scientifically, because those, as far as I know, are the strongest grounds we have for knowledge. And I haven't found anything other than that could be a better source of knowledge reliably. So when I try and follow these scientific and philosophical approaches, I hit this wall of there is no evidence of a God. Like, there's nothing that indicates a God. So I can't justifiably believe in one because the best sources of information we currently have, which aren't perfect, don't indicate one.
Yeah. What if I were to ask you, do you want to believe in God? I mean, I'm going to take a guess. Your answer is going to be yes, but only if he exists or something like that. But what is your real answer?
I wish there was a God if it was an all-good God. I would not want to believe in the Christian God because of all the killing and stuff. I see him as really, really immoral. Yeah. But I would want to believe in a God if there was an all-good God that existed. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think I might. This is sounding familiar. I think I might have asked you that last time we talked. Possibly. Yeah. Yeah. It's something that's on my mind. But the reason I ask a lot of atheists is because if you want to believe, if you sincerely want to at least find out if God exists, that's, to me, a very, very good sign, you know, like seek and you shall find, that kind of thing. And I do find a lot of people are really, really, really obsessed with finding out if there's a God, or at least trying to shore up their arguments that there is no God. I find great encouragement in that. One of my favorite interviews that I did of an agnostic was Steve McRae. Do you know him?
Yes, I know him a little bit. Yeah.
Do you like him?
It's debatable. We've gotten
Okay.
into some arguments before, so.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like he rubs atheists the wrong way, and I'm not quite sure why. I see him on Facebook and stuff like that. But when I see someone that's that obsessed with, this sort of splitting hairs on where's atheism, where's agnosticism, and all that sort of thing, I like it. It warms the cockles of my heart. But this is not me interviewing you, but can you just talk to me a little bit about that sort of atheism, agnosticism world where people are trying to refine the definitions? Can you just give me your impression of that and where you stand on some of these definitional questions?
All right, it's a classical dichotomy between colloquial usage of a word and the more philosophical, technical terminology. Like, for example, the word universe. In physics, the word universe applies to our known, local, observable universe. It doesn't apply to everything. Whereas in the colloquial usage, the word universe applies to all existing stuff, just everything. The cosmos is the more technical term. And atheism and agnosticism have the same kind of dichotomy between the colloquial usage and the philosophical usage. The colloquial usage is more the lack of belief kind of a definition of atheism that Dillahunty and Silverman and Harris and Hitchens and Dawkins they use, whereas the technical usage by more philosophical or philosopher atheist is the atheism is the positive rejection of a belief in a God, and that's more of what's used in the philosophical literature and the papers. And so Steve uses the philosophical definition of atheism, whereas most average people use the colloquial definition of atheism. And he doesn't like that because there are certain kinds of contradictions when you use the colloquial terminology. Most people, but they just don't apply to most people. It's not something that really comes up to them.
So do you think it's important to have clarity in that discussion among non-believers?
Well, it's only important as long as you know which definition a person is using. So as long as I know what you're saying when you're saying it, then I can respond to the point that you're making, regardless of what language you're using.
So you can clear that up in 5 seconds, 10 seconds,
right,
or a minute tops. Okay, so not a big deal. It's not a big deal. But all of the many man hours that go into discussions between someone like Steve McRae and those who are opposing him in the atheist camp, if they're not hashing out definitions, what are they doing?
Well, they are hashing out definitions, but definitions are arbitrary. Language is arbitrary. It's the natural ambiguity of language. You can make words mean whatever you want them to mean. There isn't such a thing as a correct definition. The language is the more popular usage wins out. Whatever is the group goes with, that's the definition that is the correct definition. For example, like the word gay used to mean happy, and now it's attributed to the LGBT community because they adopted the word. I mean, it really has nothing to do from its meaning or its history about the LGBT community, but they adopted it, and so now that's what it means. Language is arbitrary.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? I was going to make a joke, by the way, that you just sort of debunked your whole theory that God is not God. Because
how so?
Because you said, well, David, I can have something that's just like God, but it's something else. Well, you just said that it's sort of like the consensus of what people mean by the word God. It's like,
right. Language.
You're outnumbered. You're outnumbered.
Language is a conceptual thing, not an existing thing. Regardless of what you call something, it doesn't make something exist or not exist. If we all agree unicorns exist, but unicorns don't actually exist. So it's two different spheres of knowledge.
I still think unicorns exist.
Me too, but don't tell anybody.
I don't know if they're like rainbow colored, but
I go with pink and diamonds.
Can we talk a little bit about the science of evolution, please? Because I'm so ignorant. Just tell me what I should know. Like the sort of like, if you were to give a 5-minute elevator pitch to a young Earth creationist using hard science, what would you pitch?
Are you talking more evolution, as in from one cell to, from like amoeba to person, or are you talking evolution as in the origin of life from living to non-living, or non-living to living?
That's the part that interests me more, but you might not like that.
Which one?
non-life to life is the part that interests me more. But if it's harder for you, you can do the other one.
Well, I just asked because one of the first thing you always ask a young Earth creationist is, what do you mean by evolution? Are you talking about the origin of life kind of evolution from non-living to living? Or are you talking about the evolution from a single cell to a human? Because those are two different things.
Yeah.
And there's two different lines of evidence to go through. So if you find the abiogenesis more important, that's where I would start.
Okay.
So in regards to abiogenesis, the first thing is, do you know what RNA is?
Yeah, roughly.
So RNA can be assembled from purely non-organic things. We can see it on clay. We can watch it happen in a lab. RNA can assemble itself on clay with no like direct interaction of a person. We just watch it happen.
Okay.
So would you consider RNA to be a living thing?
I don't know. What do the scientists say?
Science goes with yeah, because science can just say we go from RNA and we can see RNA be made on clay, and we can see RNA self-replicate, and we can see RNA produce DNA, and so we can watch the stages go from one to another to lead up to what will create life. So yes, the consensus is that life is a purely natural process, that abiogenesis happened.
Yeah, but what you asked me, do I think RNA is life? Is that what the science textbooks teach? That's life?
Well, the definition of life in science is far more ambiguous, but the consensus in science is that we definitely went from non-living to living. It's just, where do we draw the line? Kind of like the species problem. Like, is Archaeopteryx a bird or is it a dinosaur? We don't really know. We don't really have concrete definitions on where to place things, one or the other, because it's just a spectrum. So the life applies the same thing. We know the consensus in biology is that yes, life came from non-life, but we don't know where exactly we should call the first life.
Yeah. I was talking to someone, and he said that it's like you consider yourself an adult now. I take it, right? Adult.
Unfortunately, yes.
You would check that box like on the consensus form, the census form, or whatever. Yeah. So would I. But this guy that I was interviewing said, well, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous to ask some of these questions, because it's like asking, which moment did you go from non-adult to adult? There is, and like he used the example of taking a series of photographs every day, and then you have to like pick the two sequential photos where this was not adult, this is adult. So do you agree with that sort of analysis of that gray area? It's hard to pinpoint.
Absolutely. That's the species problem in biology. We can't ever say that this is exactly where the species begins and this is where the species ends. There's a split here, because if we did that photograph thing, there'd be so little difference. We'd never really be able to tell one species from the other species. It'd all just be a continuous line.
Yeah, these are interesting problems. What did they call that? Sorites? The Sorites problem?
I don't remember.
It's like you put one grain of sand on the table and then you put a second one.
Oh, Sorites, yes.
Sorites?
Problem of the heap.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything to say about that problem?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem, because when you try and classify an emergent phenomenon definitively based on the conglomerate parts, it's essentially impossible.
Okay.
It's like, when does an ocean become an ocean and not a lake? Or when does a drop of water become a puddle? It's like there's not really a metaphysical distinction there. It's kind of just arbitrary.
Yeah. So the non-life problem is similar, you would say?
Yeah.
Okay. What about, just to throw it out there, what about what would your sort of reaction be if for some reason you came to know and believe that there is a God and that he just created everything, like all the different kinds of plants and animals, rocks and stuff? What kind of impact would that have on your worldview if you just suddenly understood that?
Well, that would definitely have a big impact. Could you ask something more specific?
Well, I mean, if 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 it turns out that you have a creator that's all good, and he's not a bad guy like what you think the Old Testament or maybe even the New Testament describe, but he's a nice guy, a good God, all good, and he is infinitely powerful, and he was able to create the universe and life forms, like what came first, chicken or the egg? Well, the chicken came first because God made the chicken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a pretty trippy worldview. don't you think? I was just wondering what impact that has on you, like if to just sort of contemplate what if. Do you like that? Do you like contemplating that sort of wacky scenario?
Sure. I don't know exactly how to process it. Like, if God could give a finite definition of where life began and where it didn't begin, then I would accept that as a distinction between where to draw the line between life and non-life, if I believed that kind of a thing.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. Like from my Catholic perspective, I mean, I just take it for granted that life is radically different from non-life, and that there's an infinite gap between the two, just like there's an infinite gap between something and nothing. But when you contemplate the here and now and some of these philosophical problems of the heap and stuff like that, and some of the precursors to life and how they can seem to organize themselves just because of their own nature and because of the chemistry and the physics that's there in the nature of the matter, right? It creates a lot of ambiguity, and that contrasts pretty strongly with my Catholic view, where God just made, he made a bird, bang, he made a human, bang, and it solves a lot of those problems, but it also allows me to have. I mean, I do live in the same world that you live in, so I still have to contemplate those grains of sand and the heap. When is it a heap? And the ambiguities of language and definition. I still have to deal with all of that, even though I'm Catholic. And if there are some wonderful geometries in inorganic matter that tend to, under the right circumstances, become in some way organic, or to be, like you said, folding themselves into RNA, these sorts of things, that in and of itself is not enough to make me question the fact that God created everything. It's just a wonderful aspect of God's creation. Much like if you think about the quantum realm, which atheists are obsessed with, it's just as wonderful for the Catholic as for the atheist.
Right. We can definitely come up with answers to try and define a Boolean distinction. Either it's true or false. This is life and not life once it gets to exactly this point. But the question is does that definition we've come up with correspond to reality?
Yeah.
So I would ask, even if we grant that God created life, God would have to come up with some definition and say life begins at point X. And he's going to have to give a way to distinguish point X from the thing previous to point X, the thing after point X. So God also has to answer the problem of the heap. If we add one grain of sand, is it a heap now? And God's going to have to come up with an answer to that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, his definition is just arbitrary.
Yeah. I'm fascinated. I'm looking forward to heaven, partly so that I can sit at God's feet and hear some of this stuff explained. But there's value in discussing it. Now, there's something a little bit off topic. If you don't mind, I'd like to run it past you. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
It has to do with determinism and hard determinism, that is, and quantum indeterminacy. Stop me if I've already asked you this, but I have an interesting thought experiment where I can prove that the so-called indeterminacy is hard determined. Have I told you this before?
Maybe. I don't remember, though.
Okay. So it has to do with the fact that the statistical outcomes are predictable in quantum physics, like very, very, very reliably predictable. And that therefore, if we examine the curve of data that's generated by one experiment or multiple experiments, they will conform to these distribution curves, right? So the reason that I think about this is because a lot of atheists want to point to the ambiguities of the quantum world as some sort of possible hiding place for free will. But if we examine the actual output of the data that's collected around the world in the quantum physics labs, and we see how it's conforming perfectly with these statistical outcomes, this does have some bearing actually on the question of nominalism versus these universals, because there is a conformity, right, based on these statistical expectations, and these expectations are being met. And so this, if we work backwards in time, if we look at that perfect graph and then we back up and we remove the data going backwards through time, at each step in that backwards analysis, in that retrograde analysis, we can know with certainty which part of the curve has a little notch in it, because that data point, we've removed that by stepping backwards in time. And so now our curve is a perfect curve minus that one notch. And then we go back one more data point, and we see the second notch over here that needed to be filled in by that second to last experiment, and so on and so forth. So at every stage in this so-called statistical science, we see that there's a perfect 100% determined outcome. What do you think?
Right. That was Einstein's interpretation of the particle duality, but there was a test done called the delayed quantum eraser that showed that wasn't actually the case. It is actually more random than that. But my position is, I agree, free will doesn't exist. Free will is logically impossible. There can't be free will. Most atheists usually say there can't be free will, but theists usually say there can be free will.
Yeah.
But even if we grant that quantum randomness is really a thing, that doesn't get you free will. That's just randomness. Like, if you do an action, either you do the action for a reason, in which case it's determined by the reason, or you do it for no reason, in which case it's random. Now, if it's random, it's not a free action, so you don't have free will. And if it's determined, it's not a free action, so you don't have free will.
Yeah. And then the other, I agree with that. But of course, the supernatural component that I have is a deep mystery where we actually have the freedom to go one way or the other. And the atheist doesn't have access to that. And I don't understand free will, but I do believe that I have it. And if I didn't believe that, I would cease to be Christian. I would cease to be a monotheist, actually. But yeah, I wanted to ask you something. Did you have anything else to ask me before we wrap up soon? Because it's approaching 1 hour.
Sure. Do you believe God can do logically impossible things? Can God create a round square, or
No.
2 + 2 = 5?
No.
So if free will was shown to be logically impossible, then God couldn't do that either.
I mean, you can show me, like, you've seen that you're going to use division by 0 or something. You know, it's like one of these fallacious proofs. But yeah, you can go ahead and try to prove that, but I won't believe your proof.
Well, it's more like the square circle. I can use the exact same proof of the example I used before.
Okay.
Every choice that is made is either going to be done for reasons, in which case it's going to be determined by the reason, or it's going to be made for no reason, in which case it's going to be by definition random. Neither of those things are free, and there's nothing you can add to that dichotomy to get freedom. So you either have reasons or no reasons, which is P or not P, just like a circle is round, or a square has four angles. If it doesn't have 4 angles, it's not a square. If it's round, it's not a square.
Yeah, I don't believe in randomness. So I'm only left with P, which is that everything has a perfectly sufficient reason, including free will. Free will there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for free will. It's just I don't know what the explanation is, but I take it on faith that I have free will. But there is no randomness. Everything has a reason, including God's existence. God's existence has a perfectly reasonable explanation. Just I don't happen to know what it is other than his existence. His essence is existence, or he's a being. But that's not. That's just sort of stating one aspect of his existence, which is that he's necessary and his essence is existence. So it's the same thing with free will. I think you'll admit that you feel like you're free. You feel like when you're presented with an option or different options, you can choose, right? So we apprehend our free will in that way. And I was a hard determinist for a long time, so I know how to rationalize the feelings away. But now that I'm Catholic, I take it as a direct apprehension and intuition that we are actually free. So there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why we make the choices we do. And like I said, I think last time I might have mentioned that many of the choices we think were made freely are not made freely, right? We have lots of scientific data that seems to suggest that we psychologically err on the side of thinking we're free in a lot of circumstances.
Right. There are tests that we can show that looking at your brain, we can know what decision you're going to make 7 seconds before you make it.
Yeah. stuff like that. So I sometimes I sometimes fantasize that every human has one free choice in their whole life. Like they think, oh, today I chose this, I chose that. Oh, now I'm choosing what to watch on TV. I chose which dress to wear to the dance, whatever. But all of that was hard to determine. But there was just one decision, one decision they made that was free. You know, God only knows which one it was, but that determines your if you're going to go to heaven or hell.
Well, suppose there was this one decision. So you have this decision, and you're going to have to make a choice between like X and Y or whatever.
X and not X.
Yeah, X or not X. And you're going to pick, and you have to pick either for reasons. You have to like look at X and say X has these beneficial reasons and these negatives, and Y has these X beneficial reasons and these negatives. And you're going to have to pick for the reasons, in which case it's determined by the reasons, because the reasons are going to say this one's better than the other one. And you're going to pick the better one. Or you have to pick for no reasons. You have to just discount all of the reasons. But if you do that, your choice is just going to be completely random. So how do you escape that dichotomy to get free will?
Because have you never looked back on a decision you made and said, oh, I thought I was rationalizing it this way. I thought it was because, I preferred chocolate, but it was actually because if I chose chocolate, it would get me another thing. Like, I mean, you kind of realize after the fact that what you thought justified the decision was not actually the real root cause of why you made the decision. And psychologically, you kind of fooled yourself in that moment. I've had situations like that where I thought I was doing things for one set of very rational reasons. Turns out, no, that's not why I did it. So I think your theory is a little bit juvenile, or how should I say, naive, to think that we know, like we've done a strict accounting and now we're going to make a rational decision. I don't think it works that way.
Right. I agree. I'm not saying that. I'm saying all those things that you mentioned, both the reasons we're aware of and the reasons we're not aware of.
Okay.
Those are all reasons. Those are all in the reasons category.
Yeah. Well, I clump in with all those reasons. I clump in free will.
Well, what exactly is free will? How do you get the free will in there? Because it's just either a reason, which is determined, or not reason, which is random. It's still one of those two.
Yeah. There's a reason. There's a reason, and the reason, one essential component of the reason, the clump of the in that category of reasons is your free will, and your free will is a mystery which I can't comprehend, but I have apprehended it. So that's not a very satisfying answer for you, but that's basically any important question in life is going to end up with a big question mark over it, and it's a mystery, and it's wonderful, right? Free will is wonderful, love is wonderful, God is wonderful, life is wonderful. What is life? I mean, you're telling me it's when certain organic molecules bump into each other in just the right way. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I buy that, but life, I know that life is wonderful. I don't know if RNA is life, but if it is, it's wonderful. But even the most mundane stuff like pocket lint, your worst enemy's pocket lint, like you don't like this guy, you certainly don't like his pocket lint, right? But that pocket lint is wonderful. It's amazing. It's awesome. And there's a reason why that pocket lint is there in just that configuration. And, I often like to think about the sort of necessity of everything. You might be able to trip out on this image. When I was younger, one of my friends did acid and I was supervising him, and we had a fun night. But one of the after effects was that he thought that as he moved through the air, it seems effortless, like you have space to move. But he had this image that actually it's just as solid as the most dense metal you can imagine, but it's moving out of your way just at the right time, right? It's synchronized to move just out of the way. So you can't, no matter how fast you go, you can't touch it. And so he, needless to say, felt a little bit paranoid and claustrophobic with that image in his head. But this was one of the after effects of his acid trip. But the point is that there's a sort of a necessity to every single particle is in just the right place. And, the reason I started thinking about this recently is because some atheist was saying about free will and determinism and about, evolution. He was talking about life and non-life and these sort of the neurons in his brain are why he makes the choices he makes, and he's not free, and this and that. And it just occurred to me that every distinction he's making is completely arbitrary. Like when I think about the air being solid and it's just moving out of the way as I move through it, I was thinking the same thing about the so-called tree of life, where you've got molecules to man. Like that's one organism, right? It's like just that tree, that whole tree is one organism. And then you go one step further, and the whole thing with all of its environment is also connected, like everything. This is the ultimate monism from a naturalistic standpoint, where every distinction is completely arbitrary. Like between me and you, between my being and your being, between my mind and your mind. These are completely arbitrary distinctions for the atheist.
I would disagree. We can definitely make distinctions based off time and space, for example. It's not an arbitrary distinction because it's based off of a concrete phenomenon. So we can definitely make those without them being arbitrary. The only arbitrary distinctions are linguistic distinctions we've come up with based off of definitions, like married bachelor. That's an arbitrary distinction. Like, okay, we just made it up. Like, why not? But if there's a physical correlate, then it's no longer arbitrary because it's determined by the physical nature of the thing. But like species and things, those are arbitrary. Life and non-life, that's arbitrary because it's just a definition we made up. It's not like an actual feature of the universe. It's just a made-up definition, distinction, one kind of matter with another kind of matter. But there is a hard distinction between protons and neutrons. There's a hard distinction between electrons and protons. So we can make hard, concrete distinctions, but most of the distinctions humans make are linguistic.
No, but if you zoom in a little bit closer with your quantum physics, you look at these quirks and everything else like that, you don't see it all blending into this solar matter energy mush.
No, because they're made up of different things. Like a proton and a neutron are made up of like a up quark, down quark, and like a top quark, down quark, or something. They're made of different sets of quarks. You can't zoom in and make them not the thing anymore. They're distinct things.
Do you think there's a limit to how much we can zoom in with in principle? Like, I'm not talking about instruments, but I'm talking about like in principle. What would happen if you zoomed in? What do you think you would discover there?
More stuff. Gluons, I think, is what it's called.
Okay. There's a sort of impression you get when you study physics that it's just energy in different forms, yeah?
Yeah.
So in that sense, a lot of distinctions tend to get blurred, but it's not. I'm not promoting this as an actual worldview. I'm just saying it's an interesting thought experiment to it's like with a painting. My wife's a painter, so when I look at the canvas and you see a 3D scene, a three-dimensional scene, there's foreground, background, and all this sort of thing, but if you zoom in, it's all paint. It's just a little bit of, the only difference really is the pigment, right?
Right.
So the little sheep and distant field and the fluffy clouds up in the sky, and then the human face in the foreground, it's just pigment. We're being sucked into the illusion of it. And I think there's a way of looking at our natural universe in that way too. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying I think it is, at least in principle, I think it is possible to blur those distinctions. And I think the Eastern religions tend to look at it that way, as illusion, like just an illusion.
Right. I agree. They definitely do. I just think that the scientific worldview is far more better, I guess would be my term.
Yeah. Okay. So
I wanted to ask you again. I'd like to see, if you can, take the time to really think about my distinction. Sure. Either you do something for reasons or you do something for no reasons. Sure. Because if you just saying that there's a free will, that doesn't solve the problem, because I'm going to ask the same question about that free will. Just forget everything else we've just talked about. Go into say there's this group of reasons, and one of them is free will. Okay, let's forget all the reasons and everything. Let's zoom in on that free will. How does that make a decision, for reasons or no reason? And like you said, like if you keep zooming in, you're always going to get to that same thing. Like if we use your analogy of how far can you zoom in, every time you put in free will, we can keep zooming in and ask that question.
Yeah, like I said, any important question, once you get down to it, it's a big question mark. It's a mystery. That's my answer. It's not a very satisfying answer. It's satisfying to me because that mystery is like a gateway to eternal life, right? Whereas for you, maybe it's just frustration, and then you know, life's short and then you die, that kind of thing. But for me, that's a door to God, and it's a door to eternal happiness and fulfillment. So I'm very happy with that question mark. Not to say that I want scientists to stop asking questions. I don't. But the question marks are the most exciting part for me.
Well, I think about it as like, if it's a question mark, how can you use the question mark as a justification for something? It's like, that's a UFO, it's unidentified, therefore it's aliens. Like, you can't just say it's unidentified and then say it's aliens. You've identified it.
Yeah, I mean, if I were an alien, like if I came from Mars and I had green skin, I would look down at myself and I would ask, or I'd look in the mirror and I'd ask the same question: is my existence, am I self-existent, or is someone else the source of my existence? It's the same problem we all have to face at the end of the day. Am I the source of my own existence or not? This is sort of to solve the problem of God, because God is at the heart of everything. When I was an atheist, I didn't believe in free will. Now that I'm a theist, I believe in free will, and there's a reason. The reason is because I have God, who is a mystery which will never be comprehended in all eternity. Even when I'm in heaven for eternity, I'll never fully understand God. But because I've accepted that I'm not God, that God is God, I have now a comfort level with mystery, whereas before I would just encounter a mystery and I would sort of deduce it away, like you're doing. So I was a hard determinist, and
well, would you agree that if it's a mystery, you can't use the mystery as a justification for some conclusion, right? Because it's a mystery.
No, the mystery of my free will is the justification. I mean, it's like, just picture yourself in front of the judge, and the judge says, "Why did you steal the loaf of bread?" And you, in your defense, you say, "Because my family's starving, and the shopkeeper tripled the price." And then the judge lets you go. But the thing is that your free will is a mystery, but it's still a defense that keeps you out of jail, like, because the judge takes that into consideration. The judge doesn't know what free will is either, but he knows that, oh, okay, so you freely chose to steal the loaf of bread for reason X, Y, and Z, and you don't have to go to jail. So it's like that.
The legal system, like Robert Sapolsky has done a really good job critiquing the legal system and the way it needs to change in order to accommodate neuroscience. So that's been addressed, about how the problematic system of the legal system, which is based on hundreds of years ago, which is mistaken. But my question is like, if you see something, you don't know what it is. Like, if I see an unidentified flying object, I can't then label that object, it's a unicorn. I just said it's unidentified. So if I say it's something, I've identified it, so it can't be unidentified. That's a contradiction. That I just said. It's unidentified, therefore it's an alien. So that seems to be what you're doing. You're saying there's this unidentified thing that's free will, therefore I'm going to identify it as something that indicates a God.
No. The God comes first, and then, as I told you, when I was an atheist, I did not accept free will because it's irrational. It's irrational to accept free will without God. But once you have God, then it becomes a mystery. God is a mystery, and free will is a mystery. Life is a mystery. You think that life is a bunch of random molecules bumping into each other and dancing around and whatever, but I think that's silly, right? But you think that that's scientific and logical and rational, so that's what you believe. But I believe in God, so I think life is a mystery, and that's starting point for me. It's not like I see molecules bumping into each other and dancing around, and then I say, oh, there must be a God. No. First, I accept that I'm not God, that God is God, that I'm not the source of my own existence, and that therefore there's another who is self-existent, from which I draw life.
Okay, so my question I asked a little bit ago. So if we agree that it's unidentified, like the free will is an unidentified thing, then it wouldn't be reasonable to use that unidentified thing to justify God. You could say that you just believe in free will because you believe in God, but you can't use free will to justify God, correct? Like
I think we can use free will. I think we can use free will from, like, what I often do is I justify belief in the supernatural using free will, because if there's no supernatural, there can be no free will. So I think that if there is free will, there has to be supernatural, right? It's not that I think that, I know that with rational certainty, that if there is free will, then there's more to our world than just the natural. There has to be a supernatural realm. Otherwise, free will is impossible. That's why you don't believe in free will, because it's irrational to believe in free will if you don't acknowledge God and the supernatural. So I can use free will to prove or to support belief in the supernatural.
Well, I would disagree with that. I would say that anything the supernatural can do, unknown natural things can also do. So if free will could be defined, then the natural could potentially do it. The reason I don't believe in free will is because it's logically impossible. Like a square circle is logically impossible. So just like the natural world, you can't get a square circle. The supernatural world, you also can't get a square circle. So the reason I don't believe in free will is because it can happen in neither.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that, obviously. There's a sort of accounting that you're trying to impose on reality, which, again, I would say is naive. You just can't. You're trying to do a strict accounting, but you don't even have all the numbers, so it's a little bit ambitious, your project. There is, I mean, it all comes back to me. It all comes back to this bare fact of my own existence, like we discussed last time. If I am, exclamation point, I am, then I have nothing to worry about. But if my existence comes from another, then I need to acknowledge that. And this was the turning point for me. I think we might be going in circles here. Do you want to talk a little bit about the science of evolution again?
Sure. Which part? Do you want to go more into abiogenesis or more in the
abiogenesis thing? That didn't sound too interesting. Let's talk about the sort of amoebas to man kind of journey.
All right, so evolution happens by mutations in the DNA. So the DNA will mutate or divide. Like you have whole genome duplications where the genome duplicates itself, and it's still in the same cell. And then the proteins will read the DNA and do new things. So these whole genome duplications can happen multiple times, and you get multiple layers of the DNA. And the proteins read these and make the cells survive longer than the ones that only had one copy. And then there's new mutations that cause even longer and bigger DNA, and those cause it to do new things. There's these things called Hox genes. Hox genes cause new segments to be built onto the organism. So you can have single-celled organisms go to multi-celled organisms, which we've seen in algae, and then multi-celled organisms can grow limbs and things, which we see in like tardigrades, water bears, I think is what they're called. And so we can see each of these parts being developed. We can see new mutations, new information being built from pure random processes, and these mutations happen in such a way that they build, they're progressive. They make things better over time. And this is like counting. If we can count from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, well, then we can go all the way up to like 1 million. The process doesn't stop arbitrarily at any point. That would be ridiculous. So okay. You can go from a small increase to
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I don't believe it, but I see what you're saying. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the future of humans, because I interviewed a transhumanist. Do you know the transhumanist movement?
Yeah, the ones who want to upload their brains to computers.
I don't know what they want to do, but I think that every atheist or every materialist, every naturalist, everyone that doesn't believe in the supernatural is a de facto transhumanist. You have to be excited about transhumanism if you are a naturalist of any kind. Do you agree with that?
Sort of. I would say that you would want to be a transhumanist as humans are now, but you could still be a human. You'd still want to be human in some respect, in some cases. Like, for example, you could say with genetic modifications, we can make it so you don't age, but you're still human. That could still be considered transhuman because you wouldn't be the same kind of human. You're breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking up. I wasn't saying anything. You're breaking up completely.
Oh, okay. So you could be like a humanist in the sense that you want to have all of your human parts, but you don't want to have aging. So you have some kind of genetic modification that stops aging. That could still be considered kind of transhumanism, but it could also be considered kind of humanism.
Yeah. So you're advocating some sort of cautious advancement or something?
Well, it's subjective. I would say that each individual should have the right to choose for themselves whether they want to stay human or whether they want to go to computers or some kind of hybrid or whatever.
Yeah. I read on Wikipedia about the age of life on Earth is supposed to be about 4 billion years. Is that right?
Well, the Earth is about 4 billion years. the age, or maybe that's right, but I think the age of humans is 200,000 years.
Okay.
But I think the Earth itself is 4 billion.
On it, not that Wikipedia is the greatest source of information, but I also read on a different Wikipedia page that the longest that life could survive on this planet is 4 billion years. Is that coincidence? Is that just a coincidence that we're exactly halfway through?
I don't know where they're getting those numbers, because there's the longest life could survive on the Earth is when the sun becomes a red giant.
Yeah.
So it could be, but yeah, that would probably be a coincidence.
Okay.
Because it's just any other star would just have a different number, just depending on the lifetime of the star.
Okay. I thought it was a bit odd. Like, yeah, the Earth's 4 billion years old, and we got 4 billion more to go. I thought that was a little bit odd. But like I said, I'm no science expert on these sorts of things. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about the sort of fantastic future of humanity. How many sort of active branches are there? Like, do these competing branches eliminate the competition, like, or can they operate side by side? Can they go, well, like, I mean, we're humans, right?
Yeah.
Is there anyone that's sort of like on our same level of fitness? Because it's survival of the fittest. Are we the fittest right now?
Well, the fitness has to do with what can survive in the environment. So we're the sort of fittest. The more fit would be bacteria. Bacteria is the most fit of all species right now. Bacteria wins at everything.
So what percentage of our like my mass, I weigh like 67 kilos, whatever that is. I don't even know what that means. So it's 155 pounds or something like that. But what percentage of that is my bacteria, good and bad?
Most of it. Like the mitochondria in every cell, that's bacterial. That's not actually a human genetic factor. That's something that the human cell ate, and it just became a part of the human cell. It's not actually human DNA. So most of your body is just bacteria. It's all bacteria.
So what does that say about the tree of life, where like things are supposed to be getting better as we go out on the branches?
Well, they're getting more complex. So it's like the ability to disperse entropy is higher in me than it is in bacteria, because I can use more energy faster than bacteria can.
You can bring on global warming faster.
Right. Yep.
So what do you say? Like, I used to work for environmental companies like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth and Pollution Probe. And in all seriousness, they were like Marxist, Leninist feminists, and they wanted to kill humanity so that the trees could have fresher air and stuff like that.
And that would work if you want to save the planet. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. So can you just talk to me about sort of the psychology of Darwinism, evolution, and this sort of thing? And is there a connection like with the ecological mindset, anti-human mindset?
I'm not sure what you mean exactly. So,
well, is it the logical, rational conclusion, like you just said? Yeah, kill the humans is the best thing we can do.
well, no, Darwinism doesn't have any rationale behind it. It's just whatever survives the best in the environment. It's not pre-programmed for anything. It doesn't have any thought patterns at all. It's just this pattern disperses more entropy for longer than this pattern. Therefore, this pattern is going to maintain itself for longer because it has more energy available to it. That's it.
Hey, I wanted to ask you. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I wanted to ask you. Are humans the only ones with consciousness, like self-consciousness?
No, I'd say pretty much most of the animals have consciousness, all the way down to like squirrels, mice, maybe flies.
The church teaches that we have a rational soul, meaning that we have free will and reason. I know you don't believe in free will, but and I don't think that you can believe in reason without free will, but you might think that you can have reason without free will. But like we said last time, it's just a sophisticated calculator at that point. But would you say that we're in a different category? Just the level of sophistication of our thought is different from our closest ancestor or whatever?
Sure.
Okay. So does that, what do you call that? Do you call that reason or intelligence? Or what do you call that?
Yeah, I'd just say it's a higher level of the ability to process information. It's a better calculator.
Okay. So have developed this over the course of evolution, and we turn this mind, for lack of a better word, we turn this mind on to the process of evolution, and we say, hey, instead of being blind, random chance, let's play with this process, like this mechanism of selection of the fittest and mutations and all that sort of thing. Does that, can you just talk a little bit about how that shapes the future of evolution, given the fact that there are these minds now that can get involved if they want to? I know there are ethical questions like this whole transhumanism thing, but can you just talk a little bit about that when the mind gets involved in evolution?
Well, that would be different from evolution, because evolution is purely the random mutation through changes in allele frequency. So if we deliberately did it, it wouldn't be evolution anymore. It would be artificial selection, essentially.
I see. Okay. So there's nothing we could ever do to tamper with evolution?
We can tamper with genes and everything, but evolution is just the process of random mutation. So we couldn't really do anything about it. We could send things to other planets to let evolution evolve in a different way, but we can't interfere with evolution, because that would just make it not evolution.
Okay. There's nothing to harness there. You know, humans love to harness stuff, natural resources and stuff, but evolution, this mechanism or whatever it is, there's nothing to exploit or to harness.
Well, yeah, we can definitely harness it. It just stops being called evolution at that point. It's kind of like electricity. Like, it's not a lightning bolt if I'm using a gun. It's a spark.
Okay. So that's the thing. But what about the relationship between those who are more evolved? Like, is there always going to be animosity and competition?
Probably for millions of years, yes. Always, probably not.
Breaking up.
So there will probably be competition for a very long time, but they're probably not forever.
Okay. What about, this is a completely separate question. Is there something that struck me about the evolution theory or hypothesis or whatever it is? How do you explain symmetry? It seems weird. Like we have two eyes and two nostrils and all that. How do you explain that symmetry?
It's entropy. The easiest way in order to create organisms is by using symmetry. You can copy it. That's why RNA duplicates itself. Symmetry is actually one of the most studied things about evolution, and one of the things we have a pretty good understanding about. Did I break up again?
You reckon area?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be your computer, but yeah. So symmetry is one of the things we have the best explanation about in evolution. It's studied a lot. I'm not a biologist, but it's one of the things that we really understand in biology. It makes it easier because of what we know is going on.
How many kinds of symmetry are there roughly? Hundreds, dozens, or just a handful of like kinds of symmetry? Like we're split like 50-50, left, right?
I'm not exactly sure. I haven't studied that enough.
Like, you know, is an octopus like 8-fold symmetry or something like that?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So interesting. I wonder if Fibonacci numbers or whatever come into that. Yeah,
Fibonacci numbers, probably.
Yeah.
I'm not sure in the case of the octopus, but it definitely does in certain things like flowers and shells and sea anemones and things.
So do you understand the Catholic philosophical understanding of S's and why that precludes evolution from one kind to another? Do you understand the Catholic perspective on that?
Something about humans have souls or special or something.
Yeah. No, it's because you can't give what you don't have. So like, you know, every being has an essence, and of course accidents as well, like I talked about earlier with the different accidental qualities like hair, eye color, whatever. But you can't give what you don't have. So basically when you're generating offspring, it can be the same or you know, different accidentally, but it can't be essentially different. That's the basic understanding philosophically about why evolution is impossible. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, we can prove it false by showing that mutations can cause new things that fundamentally change the species, give you new stuff.
Any big exciting ones? I'm not talking about tiny creatures. Any like the size of a rat kind of thing, where a rat turned into a bird or something like that?
No, that takes quite a bit longer. We only have things like yeast and single-celled organisms, E. coli, those kinds of things.
That's
but if
boring.
nothing can give something that's not, well, that would prove that wrong, because that something definitely can.
Well, we don't know what the breakdown is on these different kinds of creatures, right? Like there might be a whole messy herd of gross little tiny creatures that just get clumped into that one kind, and they all have the potential to have legs or not legs, and then the mutation brings out the legs, but the potential was there. It all has to do with that potential, like that actin potency concept. So do you think that I have the potential to grow wings?
Yep. Well, your lineage has the potential to grow wings, yes. Dinosaurs evolved, like T-Rex evolved wings and flew. So dinosaurs evolved the ability to do birds and started to flew. So yes, you can do it too, given millions of years.
Something to live for.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look into the science of it. What about ancient civilizations? That was something that kind of bugged me. Like I'd heard stories like they're really old civilizations and stuff like that. Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, there's tons. Like in India, China.
How old are they?
Tens of thousands of years.
Okay. How long ago? When was the first writing that we know about?
I'd have to Google it, but I think it was 12,000 years ago in India.
Okay. It's something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not too far. That's not too far back. So what kind of evidence do we have? Is it archaeological for these ancient civilizations?
Yep.
Like
we can find the cities, we can find the pottery, we can find the grave sites, we can find the walls that have been like scratched on and paintings and stuff.
Okay. And it's dated how?
I assume with different kinds of radiometric dating.
Okay, I've heard a bunch of stuff that's not reliable, and it's all calibrated to fit evolution's tall tales and stuff like that.
It makes absolutely no sense, those criticisms. Like there's a bunch of different ones, and they're all they have different qualities, so they're different ratings for certain years. They're only accurate within a certain range of years because of how the element decays. And so if you use the wrong one, then yeah, it's completely ridiculous. But that's what the creationists are doing. They're using one that's the wrong set of years to come up with a completely different conclusion.
Okay. I'll have to look into that. I don't want to look into all this boring crap, but I might look into it a little bit. What about so we have archaeology. What are some of the other big topics? You have what do you call it? Genetics, archaeology.
There's phylogeny.
Oh yeah. That one I think is silly, but that's the one Aaron's into, right? Classification of life.
Yep. The trees of life and how they relate.
You find that compelling?
Yep, because we can use genetics and look at the genetic tree and the order of the genes and where they line up to figure out exactly how the species evolved.
And make predictions?
Yep, make predictions.
Any predictions I should know about that came true?
One of the ones that was most interesting, we found that hippos are more related to whales than they are to rhinos or elephants.
Okay. Interesting.
But we can do things like the best predictions are the ones where we can say, if evolution is true, and like a fish evolved into a lizard, then exactly at this layer we will find a fossil of a species that's half fish and half lizard, and it'll only be in this layer and only in this area within like a 1 kilometer area. And they make those kinds of predictions all the time, and they're always right, pretty much.
And what do the creationists say?
No, you can't do that. The flood did it. No.
That's what I want to go with, but I'll have to look into some of this stuff. What about what do you call it? Like astronomy? You know much about that?
Cosmology.
Yeah, the stars and all that.
Yeah, the Big Bang Theory, redshift of the light, the cosmic microwave background.
That all supports ancient universe.
Yeah, the 13, that's where we got the 13 point whatever billion years, is by looking at the rate of expansion of the universe and calculating back how long it was when the Big Bang occurred.
That's pretty firmly established.
Yeah, that's extremely firmly established. That's one of the strongest cases we have in the sciences, is cosmology and biology and evolution. Those are the two like strongest sciences in any science at all.
Okay. I'll have to look into it. I mean, I have to admit, I don't like the idea of, like I've said in a couple of recent interviews on my podcast, I don't like the idea of God setting up this false history. I don't like that idea. I have recently come to understand that it might not be as tragic as I thought. And because I've come to God through a sort of virtual reality solipsism mindset anyway, there's a sort of image that I played with today when I was biking home from work, which has to do with actors on a stage, and it's a set piece. It's a period piece from whatever, 1920s, or it could even be about cavemen or, whatever. But all the actors know that it's a set, and no one's going to be upset when they go off stage and they see that in behind the set is just propped up with cardboard and gauze and whatever, right? No one's going to be upset.
Right. God could have just created everything in motion, essentially.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know much about the science. I just came to creationism through theology, but I'll be interested to watch and hear what people say on both sides of the issue. I mean, I grew up my whole life with this sort of Big Bang evolution thing. So that's kind of my second nature now. And so it's a little bit jarring to go to creationism, but I'm going to, because I put theology above the natural sciences, I will cling to it until, if it gets really ridiculous, I might go back to the sort of mainstream Catholicism, but I hope not. Because I prefer to be a creationist. But I'll definitely look into it for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear your conversation with Aaron Ra. I'll definitely watch that.
Yeah. I don't know what he's got in store for me, but I'm sure it's going to be he's going to be pumped up. And he said he made a special point of telling me, David, I want to talk to you before you talk to Kent Hovind. I have to talk to you before you talk to Kent Hovind. Why? I don't know, but we'll find out. I'll find out on Sunday. But maybe he wants to prepare me, or maybe he wants to warn me. I don't know. Get me before I'm contaminated. Yeah. What do you think of Kent Hovind, the man, the character? What do you think of him?
I think he is misunderstood. I think he's honest in what he believes. Most people think he's really dishonest, but I don't think that's true. I think you just have to talk to him in his language to get to a meaningful point. And if you can't do that, then you're essentially just talking past him, talking to him in Chinese or something. So in order to really get through to Kent Hovind, you have to talk to him in his language and in a way that he can understand what it is you're trying to say without using too much terminology, because if you use the terminology, he's going to get lost and go into his rhetoric points. And so I think he's really misunderstood and characterized as lying and dishonest in his debates when he's really not. You're not communicating to him in a way that's meaningful to him.
So what was the difference between your first talk with him and your second one, like in terms of your approach or his responses, or were they radically different in the vibe?
Not really. I just used the same approach in both of them. I just asked different questions. We had a different topic.
Oh, okay. But did it go more smoothly the second time or no?
Yeah, because having more experience with him and learning more about his position, I can understand the way he thinks and communicates better, and I can communicate to him more effectively. So the more I talk to people, the better I can understand their position and communicate with them. Because it's like I said earlier, like I don't care what definitions you use as long as I can understand what you're saying. But then I have to actually understand the definitions you use. And so the more I talk with you, the easier it is to have a meaningful conversation.
Who are some of your favorite guests that you've had recently, and who are you looking forward to interviewing next?
I really enjoyed my Fuzz Rana talk. He's Old Earth creationist. We talked about the information in the cell and abiogenesis. He was really fun to talk to. I
Oh.
really enjoyed my conversations with Luke Barnes, the cosmologist, and Robin Collins, the philosopher and physicist. I really enjoyed my conversation with Bob Price on did Jesus exist? I actually took the position Jesus does exist, and he took the position Jesus doesn't exist. That was an interesting one. I really enjoyed my conversation with Eric recently. It was really controversial. It was really confrontational, but it was fun. So I enjoyed that one a lot.
Eric?
Yeah. Eric Hernandez. It was my last one right before this one.
Oh, okay. Okay. And so what percentage of your past guests have been theists?
90%.
Okay. And when you bring a non-theist on, why do you bring a non-theist on?
Bob Price is a non-theist. He is a atheist who believes that Jesus did not exist. And I believe Jesus did exist. And because I disagree with him on that, I wanted to talk with him about his disagreement with my position, because I like to talk with people who disagree with my position and can challenge it so that I can learn something.
Yeah.
My motto essentially is John Stuart Mill. If you only know your own side of the issue, you know little of that. So I usually try to bring on people who disagree with me so that they can challenge my position. I can learn things that where I'm weak, essentially.
So I guess I owe you an apology for this one. Yeah, but I think I did warn you that I wouldn't have too much to say because I don't know the science, but I just wanted to chat with you because I like you and I thought you might be able to give me some ideas to chew on.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed our conversation as well.
But who are you excited to interview in the near future?
I got actually a lot of really awesome a lot of replies that say that there's some pretty big philosophers who say they might be willing to come on in the summer. And that's going to be exciting. I've also got some more return guests like Blake Junta, the philosopher, and Randall Rouser in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to present to them essentially my epistemology and say, here's why I believe evidence can't indicate a God, to hear their thoughts on it. And I hope to have Asmodeus Randy's come on my show and we can talk about induction and philosophy. He's an atheist philosopher. He's going to be interesting to bring on.
Has anyone challenged you with the free will thing where you thought maybe you might be wrong?
No. It's such a strong argument. Once you really try to analyze it and like make a premise conclusion format, there's no way out of it. It's deductive. That was one of the big arguments I had with Eric last week.
Okay. And you have no reason to bring Aaron Raw on your show?
Well, I would. I definitely debate with him on the philosophy because he disagrees with the philosophy, and I think philosophy is important. But I haven't really thought about it very much.
What about Matt Dillahunty? Would he come on your show?
Maybe, but I agree with Matt on so much. I'm not sure what I would talk with him about. Or maybe I could just present him my arguments and hear his thoughts on my arguments. That could work.
Someone sent me a link of a video where he finally talked about his relationship with his family and his mother in particular. Did you hear that?
Yeah, he posted that recently, like last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. What did you think about that? Sad?
Pretty typical, I think. It's pretty much the same thing I've experienced.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I didn't disown them. I'm just still used to it of hearing the "we hope you come to God" kind of a thing all the time.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, very nice to talk to you. I should get going now, but thank you so much for having me back. It's always fun to talk to you. Sorry I didn't have more knowledge to challenge you with.
No, that's all right. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for coming on, and I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Thank you, brother.
See ya.
Bye.